So, good evening, good morning, hello, friends of Herbie, and welcome to the second episode of the Campfire Talks with Herbie. If you were with me yesterday, you know that I am new to this thing with the YouTube webinars live streaming. But I think it went quite well, and as a matter of fact, yesterday we had Daniel Doiron as an impromptu guest, and believe it or not, that inspired me to actually invite other people to come on board as guests, and already we have a queue of people who want to be here. So we will change the format a little from the one that I have officially announced, and we will start with a guest. Then we will go back to my 21 minutes with Herbie, my lecture or soapbox rant, and after that we will have another 21 minutes of questions and answers. And of course, if you have logged into YouTube, you can comment, and I will see these comments, and I can even show them on the screen. Like here, we have Nick from Orlando. Good afternoon. Hi, Nick. Nice to have you here. And also we have Doug Bolling from Atlanta. Welcome, Doug. And we'll catch up with the comments later. But now I want to introduce you to the guest of this this evening, and it is none less than Michael Küsters, which I'm adding to the stream here. Michael, hello, good evening, and welcome to the Campfire Talks with Herbie. I know that you are a sort of a little celebrity on LinkedIn with the posts you do, but I will ask you more about that. And let's just take this opportunity to get to know who you are and what you do in life. So I will ask you a few questions if you don't mind, and let's see what maybe even the audience will want to tell us about this. Who are you? Tell me.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, so what am I? Who am I? It's a very philosophical question. No, actually, I work in the field of IT consulting. I'm founder of a small consulting company named intelligence.com and
Intelligence.
intelligence, yes, with a Y. So I always start with a Y. No, actually, the Y is in the middle of the word. But it's always about why, isn't it?
It
Why
is,
are we
it is.
doing
And
things?
it's good to have a why, even if it's in the middle. So, and you are an yes, a consultant in this field of agile coaching and consulting.
Yeah, actually, I started my career as a software tester. I've been doing everything, development, testing, analysis, IT project management, you name it, I've done it, got my t-shirt. And then I went into Six Sigma, got my lead transactional lean Six Sigma master black belt. Okay, it's already an entire sentence. But from there, I started to get familiar that there's different ways of working than what we were taught how to do IT. And basically, Lean Six Sigma, you get in contact immediately with Kanban, and that was basically the entry drug for the agile world for me.
I see. So you came to agile from Six Sigma. Well, that's an interesting path. And when and how did you discover TameFlow then?
Actually, I've had my own journey in the agile world. Uh, what Six Sigma basically said is that the solutions they come from the team. And when I moved into the agile space with Scrum, I also discovered how to have a team that is actually able to deliver solutions. But then the downside, I would say, in the agile community is this entire part of an infinite amount of practices. And Actually, I'm taking a bit too much time going too far, but I've seen a lot of stuff happening going on, like agile coaches who promote stuff like you should grow beans or so to get to know yourself better, or you can call upon your spirit familiar to guide you in your thinking process. And that was too esoteric, and I was longing for something more substantial that could connect. The journey from where are we currently to how do we get better performance, how do we get relevant business results in a consistent, reliable manner. And that's how I met you.
I see. Okay, and you're making a living out of this. It's your it's your profession, isn't it? How did it become like your profession?
No, that's a good question. I somehow did slide into it. I've always been a consultant. First, I was working on a technical level with my clients, and then I moved into helping them with business organization, enterprise coaching. And yeah, basically, I'm offering my expertise and the learnings I had to other companies. And
So how
yeah,
is
the learnings grow.
a typical day in your life? What are the patterns or anti patterns of your life?
Are you asking post COVID or before that?
Well, before and after the cure.
Okay, so actually, what I'm doing now since the COVID situation is a very fortunate thing for me. I'm still very busy helping my clients, but instead of commuting, I get extra time for workout and exercise. So basically, I wake up in the morning first thing, do a little bit of exercise, then just have a short breakfast, and then immediately get to my desk, start to do coaching for the clients, and that keeps me busy usually until the evening. And when I have a few minutes in between, I either do some research to further my own education, or I get into a fight with somebody on LinkedIn.
Wow! And then you also find time to get on a campfire talk with Herbie. That's amazing. And what do you think are the major challenges you see when you look at the industry to improving and what techniques do you favor and of course now how do you see TameFlow and all this?
Oh, that's a broad, deep question. Now, what I do like that the agile industry is doing is different than the traditional consulting industry. This is not about imposing a solution upon the client, but upon helping the client figure out what works for them and what it doesn't work for them. The good thing about TameFlow is it's like a laser pointer on where do we have the problems, why do we have the problems, and what is an effective approach to solving it, which is much better than going around in big circles inviting everybody to figure out, okay, what are the issues that we see and what should we improve, and we get a consensus or a majority vote that may or may not tackle what is really the problem that we are having, and which of course in the end makes everybody feel better because they contributed, but it may not have helped the organization at all, and TameFlow is different there.
Yes, indeed. I'm glad you discovered this. Another couple of questions, and then we will go on with the TameFlow parts. You've been in this industry for a while, so what are like the big rewards or the greatest achievements you've had in this working with funny people doing intellectual work?
Uh, Actually, I'm not so much of a rewards-oriented person in the sense that for me, I'm happy when I can go to bed in the evening and say I really did help somebody. That's already the joy of my day.
Yeah,
Other
that's a
than
great
that,
reply.
it's very rewarding when you see that you really helped not just an individual, but an entire organization make a difference.
Okay. Um, and I know you are contributing to the TameFlow community sometimes with very thought-provoking like posts, and the community is growing. What would you like to see happening in this TameFlow community? How would you like the the like membership to grow and to participate and interact? What do you expect out of the community?
Now, well, a community is, of course, first and foremost a community. And Steve, you've had a great advantage over all of us that you've been involved with TameFlow. Well, you created it, but we are all learners. We are still in the process. And how to say, we are experimenting. We're trying to figure out what's happening, what works, what doesn't, and we can learn from each other. And that only works when we share our experience, what we do, how to say, expose ourselves to the ideas of others, to learn from each other, and just open our minds a little bit.
That's great, but since you're talking about learning, when you learn, you need someone that teaches, and maybe the audience should know that you are one of the very, very, very first certified TameFlow trainers. So if you're around in Germany or actually anywhere in the world, because now we are using these remote tools, Michael can actually teach you a thing or two about TameFlow. How was the trainer training that trained you to become a trainer?
It was a very immersive exercise, and I mean, I've been through other Kanban trainings before, so I didn't expect to learn a lot. But when I left from the trainer, I was really like, okay, so what's important? And I was really getting into things like accounting a lot.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the accounting part is quite peculiar to TameFlow. Okay, last point on the community. Now, how do people reach you? What is your handle on the TameFlow community?
Hmm?
Your handle, your name on the TameFlow community.
As Michael Küsters with an underscore.
Okay, so dear audience, if you want to get in touch with Mikael, join the community, and there you can chat further with him. And now I move on to my soapbox rant, but Mikael, no, one last thing. What would you like me to talk about in the next 21 minutes? Let's see if I can fit that in.
Okay, I like the topic of psychological flow a lot because there's few people pay attention to it, but it's really important.
Wow, the audience won't believe this because I prepared exactly for this topic. So this is really not made up. The reason I prepared was because Daniel Baron yesterday had a very very interesting observation and reflection on that point that I raised. So maybe Mikael, I will be able to satisfy your curiosity as well as I will continue to answer Daniel's questions. I've got so many questions from Daniel in these last 18 months that limit working process was an unknown concept when he was asking questions. But anyway, I will move over to the show now. So I will put you off screen for the moment, but stay there. You will get back once this part of the show is over. And in the meantime, we have received some more comments here. We have Jitesh. Hello, guys. Welcome, Jitesh. We have Rudiger. He was here yesterday as well. Rudiger, you like this? So good afternoon and welcome. We have Veronique from Quebec, Canada. I guess that must be Daniel, who's been inviting people from Canada. Oh, and who's this? Software Process and Measurement Cast. Let me guess. This must be Tom Cagley. And you probably know that I've been on several podcasts with Tom Cagley. And not only that, but he is regularly running a Reread Saturday. And this coming Saturday, he will start rereading Tame Your Workflow. So get that book if you don't have it, and read it together with Tom. We have who's here? Anna Sikorska from Montreal. Nick. Oh, we said Nick before. What did you say here? Do we not like big circles, Michael? Okay, Michael will get back to you afterwards. We have Aram. Aram, I know, is a great fan of TameFlow. And what else? What else? Well, yes, we have some more comments, but we'll catch up later. Nick is saying, love the throughput accounting aspect. Yes. Okay, good. So now I'll go over to the screen sharing part, and it's always an adventure. So let's see if this is going to work. Just bear with me while I maneuver across the menus here. And yes, there we go. So let me just clean up a few things here so that you can better see the whole background. There. And one more thing, I need to open up my tablet so I can use Miro interactively. Just a moment of patience. Okay, I should be ready. So, let's catch up with what we said yesterday. We were talking about the 4 flows: the operational flow, financial flow, informational and psychological flow. And we looked at some of the aspects and components and factors which are part of these flows. Now, there was one particular point where I started showing like the connections between these flows, and one that we made was the connection between the operational throughput, the financial throughput, and the activity of full kitting, an informational activity, which was connecting together like the engineering side with the business side of the organization, so they could reason and communicate through a common language, a language based on numbers that represent throughput. This is one of the most powerful elements of TameFlow. It is this focusing on creating the common language. Hello, do you hear me? I got a message that I've been muted, or I was able to mute myself. Can someone comment and tell me if you hear me? Am I on? Hello? So, do you hear me? I'm getting messages. I'm getting messages that I'm muted. Okay, seems I'm okay. I'm not sure how much of my voice went lost there, but I was saying with those red circles that yesterday we saw how we could connect operational flow and financial flow, and in particular during the full kitting activity, we would have engineers and business people talking, and the creation of a common business language based on numbers that represents throughput is one of the most powerful things of TameFlow. And then we had the point of Daniel that reacted when I was reasoning around the buffer chart, saying how it could be related to flow states, and that's what I want to expand on today. So the connection here is between what happens when we look at flow time distributions, the execution signals on a buffer with buffer management, and how that can relate to flow states. So let's get to this new kind of reasoning. We know that the flow states are psychological states where we are extremely focused on what is happening. We can almost forget that time is going, and the performance of our actions is as good as it can ever be. Now, the American-Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi defined the flow states, and we had already hinted at this yesterday of this chart, which I'm bringing up here on the board, where people relate to the combination of the skill level required to perform some work and the challenge that work actually poses. If both of these are low, we are like in a state of apathy. If the skill level required is midway, but the challenge is low, we are sort of relaxed. And if the challenge is low, but the skill level is high, of course people get bored. They think it's too easy to do. Conversely, if the challenge is increasing and skill level is low, we start worrying, and then we might get into a state of anxiety. And when things are high on the one side and the middle on the others, we might get excited, or we feel completely in control. But the best situation is when we are in the flow channel, when the skill level is really high, the required skill level is really high, and the challenge is also high. Now, how does this relate to what we are doing in TameFlow? Well, when we are working on a set of work items, so like an epic, well, we are representing our progress with this sort of diagram, which we hinted at yesterday. We will look more in the details of how this diagram comes about in the next few episodes, but we will start looking at these elements even now. But the point is that with this representation, we clearly have an indication when we are in the like anxiety area. Of course, if the buffer is being consumed and we're running out of time, we will start to worry, and then to get like anxious. And conversely, if things are going really well, we might just as well get bored and feel that the work is not challenging enough. Now, how do we put these things all together? Well, we have to go a step backwards and see how these diagrams are actually constructed. Sorry about that, I'm getting confused with the cursor in Miro. So we will start by looking into flow time distribution chart. And the flow time distribution chart is really easy to construct, because what do you do? Well, you work on a story, on a work item, and you will keep tabs on how good or bad that work is progressing. But in particular, you will want to count the number of days that you consume to deliver something. So for instance, you will have after a certain number of days, you will deliver one work item, one story card, and we will tally that in this diagram. Imagine that at the bottom here we have the number of days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So this red card took 3 days, and then after a while we might deliver the next card, and that one took 5, and we keep on doing this. And as we do, we are clearly filling up this space, and the curve that is forming has this shape. What is interesting here is the average. So after a number of cards, we will see that the average flow time is somewhere there beyond the maximum elevation of this curve. Why is this relevant? Well, because then we can build this buffer. There are many ways that the buffer can be sized and positioned, but one heuristic is take the average, then you add a section which we divide in 3, and those 3 parts, the green, yellow, and red part, and this is what we are considering as the interval, the time interval that we will monitor when we are executing. So after we have defined where this buffer is, it's an easy thing to compute the buffer penetration. The mechanism is based on Little's law, and what we do is that we regularly do a linear projection based on what we have done so far, and then take that down to the time axis and find where that is hitting the timeline, and if it is within the buffer or not. Now, when you do this, the basic mechanism is that of counting cards, and when you apply Little's law, of course it's statistics, so often people will be concerned about how can I stop doing this, because you would need a lot of data for the statistics to be trustworthy. Isn't it so? Well, actually, no, it is not so. What I tell people is, start straight away, and even without doing any forecasting, just start accumulating the data. And after 12 or 15 work items that you have delivered, you will already have a very high degree of reliability in that data. The consequence of this is that you can get started really, really quickly. But then the fundamental challenge, the big question becomes, how do you establish the extent and the position of this buffer? And it's here that I sort of deviate from maybe what is the expected practice, especially if you come from a Kanban background, where you will be trying to use a lot of statistics. Many have tried to figure out whether this curve, sorry about that, it was the wrong cursor, whether this curve is fitting some known distribution or not, and use a lot of statistics. I would say that is really overkill, because one idea in TameFlow is that to be pragmatic, and that means doing the minimum amount of work that is practically viable. So I claim that even if you get this buffer wrong, it doesn't matter, because you will learn as you go, and then you can like resize the buffer or position it differently, so you can adapt the whole response mechanism according to how things are going for you. What does this mean? Well, now we will connect this to the psychological part. Switch to the next slide here, and if we are always like in the green, we can actually interpret this in two ways. Now, the team could be really good and it's performing very, very well, or it's just bored. The level of skill required is too high for that kind of work. Conversely, if they are always in the red, the team could be really, really bad, or it could be overloaded. This is not something you would know just by looking at the diagram. You would have to investigate how the people are feeling and what their overarching attitude is. So the message that I want to bring across today is that you can use the flow channel, which in our case is obviously represented by this yellow part. You can use the flow channel to calibrate your buffers. So never mind the statistics, never mind the distribution curve if it's fitting to a viable or any other known curve. Just look how the buffer is behaving. And well, if you are always in the red, maybe your buffer should be larger, or maybe it should start, so to say, more to the right on the timeline. Conversely, if it's always in the green, maybe the buffer should be tighter, or it should start more to the left. So by using the feedback you get from the actual execution, you will get hints at where do you position this this buffer. So if you are like putting it in the let's say in the 50 to suppose 80% range, well, in the two scenarios, you could maybe say, okay, our buffer should really go from 60 to 90, or maybe it should be more relaxed and even go from 45 to 85. So you will compensate for the, how can we say, the lack of sophisticated modeling in the statistics, by using the sizing and the uh, positioning of the buffer as a means to gain the right kind of responsiveness. We want teams that are always there in the flow channel because we know that's when they are most productive. But let's not forget, and of course we will get to this topic in future broadcasts. Let's not forget that the point of buffer management is to detect when you go from green to yellow or from yellow to red, because these events are execution signals. They are execution signals that will trigger information flow within the organization and presumably gain the attention of the appropriate manager who can intervene or who should know about this situation. So you see how all this goes together and how the flow aspect of the work, the operational flow, is reflected also in the psychological flow and how we can use the response we are observing through the chart to actually calibrate the chart, to calibrate the buffer and make that buffer just responsive enough so that you can keep the team in the yellow zone. Okay, I think this is it for today's lecture, and apologies if I went mute there. I don't know really what happened, but as I told you, I'm learning how to use these wonderful broadcasting tools, and I hope you got the messages through. So let's see if we have any further comments. I will bring Mikael back into the stream here. Hey Mikael, you're muted, so if you want to come back on, there we go. Thank you. Let's see if we have any further comments. Who do we have here? Guess what? It's Daniel. Instead of using a flow time distribution, can I use a throughput distribution to make my plan? Yes, you could, but I prefer to use flow time because when you start off, you presumably don't have the information to calculate throughput, and the flow time is really easy to get because you don't need to do much to have that information. It's basically taking notice of when something starts and when something finishes. So even if you could use that, I would prefer to stay on the simple side. As always with TameFlow, it might look complicated, but if you dig into the thinking behind, at the end, it's governed by like the inherent simplicity. Let's see some more comments, and then we'll ask Mikael to tell us his impressions. Nick, little law perhaps being based on average flow time. It's interesting because a lot of curves are left shifted, and the average tends to be 2/3 long, 60 or 66 percentile. The median would be, and okay, there is a second comment, would be the 50th percentile. Yes, the point of having this skewed distribution is actually to our advantage, because without a skewed distribution, which is typical of knowledge work and project management, the whole buffer management mechanism would be less effective. So the nature of the work lends itself to be handled with these tools, which we have in theory of constraints and we have in TameFlow, but not in the other approaches. Let's see. This must be Tom Cagley. I think the math would work. I will have to play with it. Okay, I'm curious to know what Tom is thinking there. Oh, we have someone new joining. It's Maddie Greda. Welcome, Maddie. And Nick, what is he saying? That was answering Tom's message. Oh, yes, it was. Thank you. Okay, so while we wait maybe for some further comments, Mikael, what's your impression here?
I just want to add a small thing on the comment from Nick and was from Tom, is that there's this funny saying that I picked up from Klaus Leopold: plans based on average fail 50% of the time. So when you're going with median, you would be running crazy with execution signals. So when you take the average, then on average you're doing okay.
Yeah, I think that's also a trap that you could fall into, that little slow is based on averages, and we know the flaws of averages, so you shouldn't be using averages. But in reality, let's not forget that the buffer is going beyond the average, because if you have the average there, the buffer gives you that extra space, which is what is interesting. So yes, we are using the averages to sort of pinpoint where the average or where the median is, as Nick probably wants it to be, because he's asking why average and median. So it's not that point that it's interesting. It's the interval that we are defining with the buffer, and this is where I repeat, I'm not so fundamentalist in sticking to one particular way of calculating these two extremes of this interval. Why? Because of what I said before. When the team is working, I look at how it's consuming the buffer, and that will give me the information of if the buffer is like too large or too small, or whether it is too much to the left or too much to the right. And if that happens, that the signal suggests that the buffer should be different, then we change the buffer. It's so simple, without doing any like convoluted calculations and so on. We have Daniel is saying something here. Buffers are a great tool to proactively manage SLAs. I think that's a perfect example, because you want to intervene when you have a problem, and not stress people when they could probably deliver in time if you did not keep on stressing them. So buffers are good for that as well. Okay, Daniel is saying something more. In all approaches, SLAs are used passively on historical data. Yes, indeed. With the execution signals that we have in TameFlow, the fact is that we detect problems. We detect problems before they have a negative impact, and I always say that detecting is better than inspecting. There is this whole thing in the quality movement that you cannot inspect quality into a product. You have to build it in. And I would say, if that holds true, and maybe Mikael, you with Six Sigma can tell us more about that. If that is true, then this whole point of having sprints and then after the fact inspect and adapt, in my opinion, is a very ineffective and very slow way of acting on things that are affecting you negatively, because you are becoming aware of them with a lot of delay, and then before you act, even more time passes. What do you think about that, Mika?
And that's actually a great question, and it's also one of the things in my typical work as a consultant is relevant for my clients. That retrospectives, in my opinion, they are good to how to say to take another look at the big picture, but they are horribly inadequate to deal with execution signals because by the time the retrospective rolls around, the signal may already be out of date and either we've already lost the customer or it wasn't important. And either way, to pick it up in a retrospective after the fact, it's not helpful anymore. So we need a different mechanism. Execution signals should be real time and proactive as far as possible so that we don't just have a retrospective, but we can also have a forecast what's going to happen in the future. And that is what organizations today really need because we don't always want to run after the problems. We don't want to have them in the first place.
Yeah. And now, before I mention that, it's easy to get started. That you don't need to have a lot of data, and typically, if you have 12 data points, you already have like a 90% uh, confidence range. Do you agree with that?
Mm, I mean, in theory, I would say that it depends on your distribution. But the funny part is when you're measuring right from the outset, then your sample size is equal to your population, and in that case, you are acting with a pretty high level of confidence because you are not making statistical interpretations. You're just looking at the data that is there.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and I think that that is the whole sense of, just get started. Don't worry if you today when you're starting with this that you don't have data. Uh, just get going, and once you have delivered like a dozen user stories or whatever your unit of work is, you can start reasoning with these tools and use Little's law to make the projection. And yeah, another thing there that certainly relates to the issue of sizing and positioning the buffer is the fact that as you know, Little's law is applicable only under certain well-known conditions where the system is like stable. When you have the two lines that are parallel, the inline and the outline. So one interesting aspect is, in reality, the systems are not that stable at all, and you have to put in a lot of effort to make them stable. Um, so it would appear, and this is an objection I've had a few times, that since most systems are not stable, then you cannot apply the reasoning, you cannot apply Little's law, and therefore the whole thing of the buffer just collapses. So this would not work. But I would just say, it's true, systems are not stable, but if you're applying this kind of reasoning, you will notice if the instability is in your favor or against you, because then the consumption of the buffer will consistently be unbalanced. And what you do then you just like expand or contract the buffer and move it to where it is more convenient. So this is so quick to do that even if the system is unstable in your starting conditions, you can very quickly convert and have a buffer that is responsive for that situation. And that buffer will capture the, let's say, additional variation that you have on top of the stable system that would be like the ideal state. Does that make sense for you, Mikkel? Was that
I was distracted with the chat. Sorry.
Okay. Well, never mind. We'll catch up. Let's see if we have some other question here. I missed this one. Aram, when implementing TameFlow, how do you communicate buffer charts to the team members, and how do you avoid Parkinson allows you to fill the buffer. So communicate is easy. You just print it and stick it on the wall. It should be like almost a real-time thing that is always visible. I when I have teams, I will have like the all the charts that are interesting. I will have them like on the side or on top or below of the team's Kanban board, and of course they must be updated. And what I say is, as soon as a work item changes position, changes column or semicolon, update the chart and put it up there. So of course, if you have electronic tools that do this, it's more convenient. How do you avoid Parkinson's law and student syndrome? Well, I think that Parkinson's and student come about only when you're doing actual estimations, and that was the whole point. The whole point of a critical chain project management, that would take the estimates and like cut them in half, and the remaining half, cut it in half again, and that would be the buffer. Why? Because in normal estimation there is so much padding, and if you happen to finish sooner, you are not passing the gain on to the next peer who's going to pick up the work. So you won't get the benefit of actually going faster. If someone goes faster, then things stop and slow down in any case. But because we are using probabilistic forecasting, we don't have people estimating, and therefore these phenomena, I think, will disappear by the very fact that we are not asking for expert opinion estimates. Do you have an opinion on that, Mika?
Yes, definitely. Aside from the point that you mentioned that we don't need any estimates, so basically we don't care what people think, how long it should take, and then give them time to procrastinate. That is one, but the
That's
other
a
part
nice
is
expression. Or give them time to procrastinate.
yes. And the other thing is we come back to the phenomenon of psychological flow. When I am in flow, I do not have those issues. And part of TameFlow is that we can't isolate the four flows. We have to create an organization that synergizes the four flows. And so when people are in a state where Parkinson's law or student syndrome are a problem, then there is something else that we need to deal with, and that is why are they not satisfied with the work they're doing?
Yeah, well, that's a great observation. Thank you for that one. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have Nick again. Buffer size to current conditions. Noted. Yes, correct. And of course, Tom is always pragmatic and say it makes sense. Thank you, Tom. Okay, I think we have probably reached the end of today's broadcast, and yes, a few points maybe didn't go as well. I went muted for a while and missed a few maneuvers with Miro, but yeah, no, stick with me. I'm learning this, and probably will get better. So, is there anything else you want to add, Mika?
I just would like to say as a closing note, I think it was great what we saw today, the relationships of the different measurement systems. It was really exciting. And I'm sure that other people will also have found the same value. And that is one of the things that attracted me to TameFlow from the beginning, is that where typically we have different initiatives done by separate departments, or even completely separately in the organization without talking to each other, to take a look at the different problems, like the operational flow and the psychological flow, and we combine them in TameFlow to synergize and find a place where we need to optimize, how we need to optimize.
Excellent, and it shows that you've been working on TameFlow, and since you are now offering like the trainings, I just want to remind the audience that if you need to take a training, we have them up on tameflow.com/tameflow-training, and Mikael, I hope that soon we will see your courses coming up there as well. Um, so I think this is it for today. Remember to sign up for the notifications. If you go to, I don't have it written down, but tameflow.com/campfire, you will find the links to get notified when we have the next episode. So until next time, remember, always stay behind Herbie. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. So we're ending the broadcast.